I'm Clara, 29, standing in the crowd at my brother Nathan's Navy SEAL ceremony. My heart swells with pride for him, but it aches too. My family's whispers cut deep, calling me a failure for leaving the Navy years ago. I clutch my grandfather's anchor pendant, trying to stay invisible. Then the admiral's eyes find mine. "Captain Winslow," he says, and the world stops. My past isn't what they think. Have you ever been misjudged by those you love? Like and subscribe to hear my story. 5 years ago, I was 24, a Navy logistics officer waking before dawn to the hum of the base. My uniform felt like a second skin, starched and sharp. I loved the rhythm of it all, leading my team through supply runs, ensuring every ship had what it needed. The weight of responsibility thrilled me, made me feel alive. I'd check manifests under flickering hangar lights, my boots echoing on concrete, knowing lives depended on my precision. My grandfather's stories of his Navy days fueled me, his pride in me, a quiet fire. But the deployments wore me down. My last one, a 6-month stretch on a carrier, left me frayed. I'd wake gasping, heart-racing, visions of missed drops haunting me. I didn't know it was panic attacks, then just thought I was weak. I hit it, pushed through, but the cracks grew. I started doubting every decision, second-guessing orders I'd given 100 times. My team noticed, their glances shifting from trust to concern. I'd catch my reflection in a porthole, barely recognizing the woman staring back, eyes hollow, jaw tight. Leaving wasn't a choice I made lightly. I sat in my bunk for hours, turning over the idea like a stone. The Navy was my identity, my family's legacy. My father, Harold, a retired mechanic, wore his service like a badge. My mother, Gail, never served, but hung on his stories. My brother Nathan, 19 and starry-eyed, was already talking about SEAL training. They'd never understand. But I couldn't keep pretending I was fine. I filed my resignation, hands shaking as I signed, feeling like I was cutting out a piece of myself. Telling my family was worse. We sat around the oak dining table, the one we'd carved our initials into as kids. The smell of roast chicken filled the air, but it turned my stomach. Harold leaned back, arms crossed, his gray eyes fixed on me. Gail fussed with her napkin, avoiding my gaze. Nathan, home from basic training, picked at his plate, his buzz cut making him look younger than he was. I took a breath, my fingers tracing the anchor pendant under my shirt, the one Grandpa gave me before he passed. I said it plain. I'm leaving the Navy. I expected questions, maybe worry. Instead, Harold's face hardened. "You're throwing away our legacy," he said, voice low, like I'd betrayed him personally. Nathan looked up, his fork, frozen disappointment flickering in his eyes. Gail reached for my hand, but Harold cut her off. "You had potential, Clara. Now what a desk job." I tried to explain, the words tangling. "It's not about quitting," I said. "I just need to breathe." But they didn't hear me. Nathan shook his head, muttering something about commitment. Gail stayed quiet, her silence louder than Harold's words. I left the table, my chair scraping the floor. Upstairs, I packed my duffel, folding my uniforms with care, each crease a goodbye. The anchor pendant felt heavy against my chest, like it was accusing me. I wanted to scream that I wasn't a failure, that I'd given everything to the Navy until it broke me. But their words clung heavy as damp wool. I zipped the bag, staring at the room I'd grown up in, the model ships on my shelf, now feeling like relics of someone else's life. I wasn't sure who I was anymore, but I knew I couldn't stay. I moved into a 1-bedroom apartment across town, the kind with thin walls and a leaky faucet. My new job at a warehouse kept me busy, stacking boxes, checking inventory. The hum of forklifts, a pale echo of ship engines. I was good at it, efficient, but it felt like moving through fog. At night, I'd lie awake, the city's hum outside my window, no match for the silence inside me. Sleep brought dreams of open water, of orders I couldn't fulfill, waking me in a cold sweat. I'd sit on the edge of my bed, hands gripping the mattress, trying to anchor myself to the present. I kept my Navy ID in a drawer tucked under old letters. Sometimes I'd pull it out, tracing the photo of myself at 22, all confidence and sharp salute. That version of me felt like a stranger. I didn't talk about the Navy, not to coworkers, not to the barista who knew my coffee order. I wanted to be someone new, someone who hadn't failed, but the weight of my family's words followed me, their disappointment a shadow I couldn't outrun. Leslie, a coworker with a quick laugh and sharp eyes, was the only one who got close. She'd linger during breaks, sharing stories about her kids' soccer games, her voice warm and easy. One day she caught me staring at a shipping label, my mind miles away. "You okay, Clara?" she asked, her tone gentle but probing. I nodded, forcing a smile, but her frown said she wasn't buying it. She didn't push, just slid me a soda and changed the subject. I was grateful, but her kindness made me feel exposed, like she could see the cracks I was hiding. Family gatherings were worse. I went to one a few months after moving out, a summer cookout at my parents' place. The backyard buzzed with relatives' kids chasing fireflies, the grill sending up clouds of smoke. Harold stood by the cooler, telling anyone who'd listen about Nathan's SEAL training, how he'd aced his first dive. Nathan, taller now, his shoulders broader, soaked up the praise, his grin wide. I stayed by the picnic table, picking at a paper plate, hoping to blend into the chatter. Then Nathan spotted me. He sauntered over, a beer in hand, his voice loud enough for others to hear. "So dropout, what's the civilian life like?" He meant it as a joke, I think, but the word landed like a slap. Heads turned, cousins smirking, and I felt my face burn. I mumbled something about work, my throat tight, and excused myself to the kitchen. Gail was there, slicing watermelon, her hands steady but her eyes worried. "You don't have to come to these," she said softly. I shook my head. "I'm fine." I lied, and she let it go like always. Leslie tried to pull me out of my shell. One afternoon, as we sorted crates, she mentioned a veterans event downtown, a casual thing with food and music. "You'd like it," she said, her voice careful. I froze, my hands gripping a clipboard. "I don't do that stuff," I snapped, sharper than I meant. Her eyes widened, but she just nodded, turning back to her work. I felt a pang of guilt, but the thought of facing other vets, of answering questions about my service, made my chest tighten. I couldn't risk being seen as the one who gave up. Back home, I found a package from Gail, a photo of Nathan in his SEAL gear, his face all determination. It was meant to be kind, I know, but it twisted something inside me. I set it on my counter, staring at his proud stance, his future so clear while mine felt like a blur. I opened the drawer, the Navy ID glinting under the lamp. My family's voices echoed Harold's scorn, Nathan's careless jab, Gail's silence. I slammed the drawer shut, my breath ragged. If I was such a failure, why did it hurt so much to prove them right? 3 years later, I was 27, still at the warehouse. My days a blur of scanning barcodes and dodging small talk. I'd gotten good at fading into the background, keeping my head down, my answers short. But the ache never left, a dull throb that flared whenever I heard Nathan's name. Harold couldn't stop bragging about him, his SEAL missions, his medals. Every family call was a shrine to Nathan's grit, his courage. I'd listen, phone pressed to my ear, my kitchen dim, feeling like a ghost in my own story. I started therapy in secret, slipping into a small office after work. The therapist, a woman with kind eyes, called my panic attacks PTSD, a word that felt too big for what I'd been through. I didn't talk about it much, just nodded as she gave me breathing exercises. It helped a little. I could sleep some nights without dreaming of endless seas or botched supply drops. But I kept it from my family. They'd think I was broken, not healing. Nathan's SEAL buddy Marcus showed up at our house one weekend. He was tall, easygoing, with a laugh that filled the room. We were at a barbecue, the air thick with charcoal and summer heat. I stood by the fence, nursing a soda, watching kids toss a frisbee. Marcus joined Harold by the grill, their voices carrying. "Nathan's killing it out there," Marcus said, his tone full of respect. "He's got that Winslow fire." Harold puffed up, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "That's my boy," he said. "Always knew he'd make us proud." I tried to focus on the frisbee, the laughter, anything else. But then Harold's voice sharpened, aimed at Marcus, but loud enough for me to hear. "Not like Clara," he said. "She couldn't hack it. Gave up before she even started." My stomach twisted the soda can cold against my palm. I glanced over, hoping Marcus would change the subject. He didn't. He just nodded awkward and said something about tough choices. Harold snorted. Tough? She just ran. I turned and walked to the garage, my sandals slapping the pavement. The space was cluttered old tools and boxes stacked against the walls. I leaned against a workbench, my breath shallow, trying to swallow the humiliation. Harold's words weren't new, but hearing them spilled to a stranger, someone Nathan trusted, cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to march back and tell Marcus the truth, that I'd led missions, saved lives, that I wasn't some quitter. But my voice felt locked away, buried under years of their judgment. I found a notebook in my purse, one I'd started keeping for moments like this. I sketched a destroyer ship, its lines sharp, cutting through waves I'd never see again. The pencil scratched the page, steadying my hands. I'd always loved ships, their strength, their purpose. Drawing them was my secret, a way to hold on to the Navy without admitting I missed it. Each stroke felt like defiance, a quiet rebellion against the failure they saw in me. Gail found me later, her apron smudged with barbecue sauce. She didn't say anything, just stood there, her presence soft but heavy. You don't have to stay, she said finally. I closed the notebook, my throat tight. I'm fine, I said the lie. Automatic. She reached out, then stopped, her hand hovering. I wanted to tell her how much it hurt, how Harold's words made me feel small, but the garage door creaked open. Nathan called for her, and she left, her footsteps fading. I drove home, the radio off, the city lights blurring past. My apartment was dark when I got in, the air stale. I sat on the couch, the notebook open in my lap, the ship staring back at me. Harold's voice echoed, not like Clara couldn't hack it. I gripped the pencil until it snapped, the sound sharp in the quiet. I wasn't just a disappointment to them. I was becoming one to myself, and that hurt worst of all. The weeks after the barbecue blurred into routine, but the sting of Harold's words clung to me like damp air. I stopped answering family calls, letting them pile up in voicemail. Gail left messages, her voice soft, asking if I was coming to Sunday dinner. I'd listen, then delete them, my finger hovering over the screen. I told myself it was easier this way, staying away, keeping the hurt at a distance. But the silence in my apartment grew louder, pressing against my ribs. Leslie didn't let up at work. She'd lean against a pallet, her ponytail swinging, and talk about the veteran support group she'd joined. It's not what you think, she said one day, her eyes searching mine. Just people talking, helping each other. I was labeling boxes, my markers squeaking against cardboard. I don't need that, I said, my voice sharp enough to make her flinch. She paused, then shrugged. Suit yourself, Clara. But you're carrying something heavy. I turned away, my jaw tight, stacking crates with more force than needed. Her words burned, not because they were wrong, but because they saw too much. I kept sketching in my notebook, filling pages with frigates and carriers, their hulls slicing through imagined storms. It was the only place I felt in control, where I could still be the officer I'd been. But even that felt hollow some nights. I'd sit at my kitchen table, the lamp casting shadows, and wonder if I'd ever stop proving Harold right. The therapist had me write down my triggers, but I couldn't bring myself to list family. It felt too raw, too permanent. Then came the call about Nathan's seal ceremony. I was microwaving dinner, the hum of the machine drowning out my thoughts, when Harold's name flashed on my phone. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. His voice was gruff, no warmth. Nathan's ceremony is next month, he said. You're coming. Don't embarrass us by skipping it. I stood there, the plastic container hot in my hands, my pulse loud in my ears. Embarrass you, I wanted to say. Like I've done my whole life, but I just said, I'll be there, my voice flat. He hung up without a goodbye. I sat on the floor, the linoleum cold, staring at the phone. Harold's demand wasn't about me, I knew that. It was about the family looking whole, the Winslow name shining through Nathan. I was just a prop, expected to clap and smile while they celebrated him. The thought made my chest ache, a deep bruising kind of pain. I opened my closet, pulling out my old Navy uniform, the fabric stiff from years untouched. I held it up, the lieutenant bars glinting faintly. I'd earned those lead missions kept people safe. Why was that never enough? Marcus texted me a few days later out of nowhere. "Nathan's pumped you're coming," he wrote. "Wants you to see what he's built." I stared at the message, confusion twisting with hurt. Nathan, who'd called me dropout, who'd barely spoken to me in years, wanted me there. It didn't make sense. I typed a reply, then deleted it, my thumb hovering. Maybe he felt sorry for me, the sister who'd fallen short. Or maybe he just wanted an audience. Either way, it didn't feel like pride. I went to bed that night, the uniform still on my chair, its shadow long across the floor. I lay awake, the city's hum faint through the window. My thoughts spiraling. Harold's voice. Nathan's distance, Gail's hesitance. They all pressed down, heavy as a riptide. I wasn't just invisible to them, I was a mistake, a blemish on their legacy. The ceremony loomed a stage where I'd stand exposed, their judgment louder than any applause. I closed my eyes, willing sleep, but all I saw was that uniform mocking me with who I'd failed to be. The morning of Nathan's seal ceremony, I woke to sunlight slicing through my blinds, my stomach already knotted. I chose a simple navy dress, nothing flashy, hoping to blend into the crowd. My fingers brushed the anchor pendant, its cool metal steadying me as I pinned it under my collar. I drove to the naval base, the road lined with flags snapping in the breeze. The air smelled of salt and jet fuel, a scent that tugged at memories I'd buried. I parked my hands, gripping the wheel, whispering to myself, "Just get through it, Clara." The ceremony was in full swing when I arrived, the bleachers packed with families, their cheers rising over a brass band. I slipped into the back row, my shoulders hunched, scanning for my parents. Harold stood near the front, his posture, rigid hands clasped behind him like he was still on duty. Gail fussed with her purse, her floral scarf bright against the sea of uniforms. Nathan was with the other SEALs, his face focused, unaware of me. I exhaled, grateful for the distance. I spotted a young sailor in the crowd, her braid tight, her eyes wide with awe as she watched the stage. She couldn't have been more than 20, her uniform crisp, her dreams still untouched by doubt. I remembered that feeling, the certainty that I could handle anything the Navy threw at me. Watching her, my throat tightened, a mix of pride and loss I hadn't expected. I looked away, focusing on the podium, where the admiral, a man with silver hair and a chest full of medals, stepped up to speak. The ceremony dragged names, called medals pinned. I clapped when others did, my hands mechanical, my mind half elsewhere. Relatives nearby murmured, their voices low but sharp. "That's Clara, the one who quit a woman," said, her tone laced with pity. Her husband nodded, whispering, "Harold's daughter, right, couldn't cut it." I stared at the ground, my cheeks hot, willing myself to stay still. The pendant pressed against my skin, a small rebellion against their words. Nathan's turn came and the crowd roared as he stepped forward, his stride confident. Harold's face lit up, his chest puffing out. Gail dabbed her eyes, smiling. I clapped my hands, stinging proud of Nathan despite everything. The admiral pinned his trident, his voice booming with praise for Nathan's valor. I shifted in my seat, ready to blend back into the noise when the admiral paused. His gaze swept the crowd, then locked on me. The air seemed to thin, the chatter fading. He stepped closer to the microphone, his eyes still on me. "Captain Winslow," he said, his voice clear, cutting through the hum. My heart stopped. The crowd turned heads, swiveling, searching. Harold froze, his brow furrowing. Gail's hand flew to her mouth. Nathan glanced back, his expression unreadable. I gripped the bleacher, my knuckles white, every muscle screaming to run. "Captain." He hadn't called me that in years. I wasn't that person anymore. Was I? The admiral's words hung in the air, heavy as a storm cloud. "Captain Winslow." My pulse roared, drowning out the murmurs swelling around me. Faces turned eyes, pinning me like spotlights. I wanted to shrink, to vanish into the bleacher's metal slats. Harold's jaw slackened, his stare cutting through the crowd. Gail clutched her purse, her knuckles pale. Nathan stood rigid on the stage, his gaze flickering between me and the admiral, confusion etching his features. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe, my body betraying me. The admiral stepped down from the podium, his boots clicking on the platform. He approached me, the the crowd parting their whispers a low buzz. "Clara Winslow," he said, softer now, but still loud enough for those nearby. "I knew you from the Albatross mission. Flawless execution. Saved my crew." His voice carried a weight I hadn't heard in years, respect I'd forgotten existed. My mouth went dry, memories of that mission flashing, the sleepless nights, the lives hanging on my calls. A woman in the row behind me gasped, her voice sharp. "Her captain, she quit, didn't she?" Laughter rippled, skeptical, cruel. Harold's face darkened, his lips parting like he wanted to speak but couldn't. I saw Marcus in the crowd, his head tilted, a faint nod of recognition. He leaned toward Nathan, whispering, "She's the one." A legend. My chest tightened, pride warring with panic. They didn't know the half of it. The classified orders, the secrecy I'd sworn to keep, the cost of carrying it alone. The admiral kept talking, his eyes steady on mine. "You were one of our best," he said. "Why didn't you stay?" The question wasn't accusing, but it pierced all the same. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. The truth that I'd crumbled under pressure, that I'd walked away to save myself, felt too raw to speak. The crowd's murmurs grew, some curious, others dismissive. Harold muttered to Gale, his voice low but clear. "That can't be right. Not Clara." His disbelief was a blade twisting deeper than his scorn ever had. I stood, my legs unsteady, the pendant burning against my skin. Every eye felt like a judgment stripping me bare. The young sailor I'd noticed earlier stared, her awe replaced by something else, pity maybe. Nathan's gaze met mine, searching like he was seeing me for the first time. But it wasn't pride I saw, not yet. Just shock, maybe doubt. The admiral waited for an answer, his expression kind but unrelenting. I wanted to tell them all, that I hadn't failed, that I'd given everything until there was nothing left. But my voice was gone, swallowed by the weight of their stares, their whispers, their truth about me. My hands trembled, my vision blurring at the edges. I was exposed, my past dragged into the open. Not as a hero, but as a question mark. Harold's denial, the crowd's scorn, Nathan's silence. They crushed me heavier than any mission I'd ever led. I stood there, heart pounding, a captain in name only, drowning in the wreckage of who I'd been. The ceremony's roar faded as I stood, my legs trembling but holding. The admiral's eyes, steady and expectant, pinned me in place. I wanted to bolt, to disappear into the crowd's blur, but something rooted me, a spark I hadn't felt in years. I straightened, meeting his gaze, my breath shallow but sure. The whispers. Harold's disbelief, Nathan's shock, they were still there, clawing at me. But the admiral's words, flawless execution, echoed louder. I wasn't just the dropout they saw. I was more. I stayed as the crowd dispersed, families hugging, cameras flashing. The admiral approached, his stride deliberate. "Clara," he said, his voice low, "you led under pressure most couldn't handle. Why hide it?" I swallowed, my throat tight. I didn't know how to stop. I said the truth, slipping out. He nodded like he understood. "Tell your story," he said. "It's yours to claim." His words landed heavy, a challenge I couldn't ignore. Nathan found me near the bleachers, his trident gleaming on his chest. He looked different up close, older, his eyes searching mine. "Clara," he said. Hesitant, "Was that all true?" "The mission," I nodded, my voice steady. "It was classified. I couldn't tell you." He shifted, his jaw working like he was piecing me together anew. "Why didn't you say something?" he asked. I looked at him, the brother who'd called me dropout, and said, "Would you have believed me?" He didn't answer, but his silence was enough. I saw Harold and Gale by the exit, their faces a mix of confusion and distance. Harold avoided my eyes, his hands stuffed in his pockets. Gale offered a small smile, her fingers twisting her scarf. I wanted to confront them, to demand they see me, but the admiral's words rang louder. "Tell your story." This wasn't about them anymore. It was about me, about the woman I'd buried under their judgment. I found Nathan again, his teammates laughing nearby. My hand went to the anchor pendant, the one Grandpa gave me, its edges worn from years of holding. I unclasped it, the chain cool against my palm. I pressed it into Nathan's hand. "For you," I said. "Grandpa would be proud of us both." His fingers closed over it, his eyes wide like he was seeing me for the first time. I turned away, my heart racing, not waiting for his response. Walking to my car, the base's hum surrounded me, jets overhead, waves crashing nearby. The pendant was gone, but I felt lighter, like I'd shed a weight I'd carried too long. I wasn't hiding anymore. The admiral's challenge burned in me a quiet fire. I'd been silent, letting their story define me. No more. I didn't know what came next, but I knew I was done running from who I'd been. Driving home from the ceremony, the coastal road stretched dark and quiet, my headlights cutting through the night. The admiral's words looped in my mind, "Tell your story," a command I couldn't shake. I'd spent years dodging my past, letting Harold's scorn and Nathan's distance define me. But standing there named as Captain Winslow, something cracked open. I wasn't just their failure. I was Clara, who'd led missions, who'd survived. I pulled into my apartment lot, the engine ticking as it cooled, and made a choice. The next day I called Leslie at work, my voice steadier than I felt. "That veteran group you mentioned," I said. "Is it still meeting?" She paused, then laughed soft and warm. "Every Thursday, Clara. I'll pick you up." Thursday came and I stood in a community center basement, folding chairs in a circle, coffee brewing in the corner. My palms sweated, but I stayed. When it was my turn, I spoke my words, halting at first. "I'm Clara," I said. "I was a Navy logistics officer. I left because it broke me, but I'm here to figure out what's next." The room listened, no judgment, just nods. A woman, Renee, with a short bob and a faded Navy tattoo, smiled. "You're not alone," she said. That was enough. Renee and I talked after over styrofoam cups. She'd served in logistics too, hauling supplies through desert convoys. We swapped stories, hers loud with laughter, mine quieter but honest. I told her about the Albatross mission, the one the Admiral named, how I'd coordinated airdrops under fire, how I'd never told anyone. She leaned forward, eyes bright. "That's not just a story, Clara. That's history." I blinked, the weight of it sinking in. History, not shame. I went home and dug through my desk, finding a card from a Navy historian I'd met years ago. My hands shook as I dialed, but I didn't hang up. "I want to document the Albatross mission," I said. "It's declassified now, and I was there." The historian's voice lit up, promising to pull records to credit me by name. I hung up my chest tight, but not with panic. For the first time, I wasn't hiding what I'd done. I was claiming it. Harold called that weekend, his voice gruff like he was chewing gravel. "Saw you at the ceremony," he said. "You should have told us about that mission." I stood in my kitchen, the phone cold against my ear, years of his dismissal flashing through me. "I didn't owe you my truth," I said, calm but firm. "You decided who I was without asking." He went quiet, then mumbled something about Nathan and hung up. I set the phone down, my hands steady. His words didn't cut like they used to. I opened a box in my closet, pulling out my Navy ID, its edges worn from years of hiding. I took it to a frame shop, choosing a simple black frame, nothing fancy. Back home, I hung it on my living room wall next to a photo of Grandpa in his sailor's cap. The ID caught the light, my younger self staring back, not a failure, but a woman who'd served. I stepped back, my breath catching, not with pain, but with something new, a quiet strength I hadn't known I still had. A few weeks after the ceremony, I got an email from the Navy historian. The Albatross mission would be featured in an archive, my name listed as lead officer. They'd found logs, photos, even a commendation I'd never seen buried in classified files. I read the email twice, sitting at my kitchen table, the morning light slanting across my coffee mug. It was real, tangible proof of what I'd done. I saved the email, not sure what to feel, but the knot in my chest loosened just a fraction. At the veteran group, I started speaking up, my voice less shaky each time. Renee was always there, her quick nods urging me on. One night I shared about the mission, how I'd rerouted supplies under a tight deadline, saving a stranded unit. The room went quiet. Then a guy with a gray beard clapped, slow and deliberate. Others joined, their eyes warm. Renee grabbed my arm after her grin wide. "You're inspiring people, Clara," she said. I ducked my head, unaccustomed to praise, but her words settled deep. My family was another story. We had a dinner at my parents' house, the first I'd gone to in months. The dining room smelled of pot roast, the table set with Gail's good china. Nathan sat across from me, his posture relaxed, but his eyes kept flicking my way. Harold carved the meat, his movements precise, saying little. Gail passed the potatoes, her smile tight like she was waiting for something to break. I focused on my plate, the clink of forks loud in the quiet. Nathan broke the silence, his voice casual but pointed. "Marcus told me more about your mission, Clara," he said. "Said you pulled off something impossible." I looked up, my fork paused. The table felt smaller, the air heavier. Harold's knife stopped mid-slice, his eyes narrowing, but he didn't speak. Gail's hands stilled her napkin crumpled in her lap. I nodded, my throat dry. "It was a long time ago," I said, keeping it short. Nathan leaned forward, not letting it go. "You should tell people," he said. "It's a big deal." Before I could answer, Gail reached into her purse, pulling out a folded piece of paper. She slid it across the table, her fingers trembling. "I wrote this a while back," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Never sent it." I unfolded it, the paper soft, worn at the edges. It was a letter dated 2 years ago, her handwriting neat. She apologized for staying quiet when Harold called me a failure for not asking why I left the Navy. I read it, my eyes stinging, her regret plain in every line. I looked at her, unable to speak. She didn't meet my gaze, just twisted her napkin tighter. Harold cleared his throat, his voice gruff. "Nathan's right," he said, surprising me. "That mission sounds like something." But he stopped there, his jaw tight like the words cost him. I waited, hoping for more, an apology, anything. Nothing came. The room felt stifling, their eyes on me. Nathan's pride, Gail's guilt, Harold's grudging acknowledgement. It wasn't enough, not after years of their silence. I folded the letter, tucking it in my pocket, my heart heavy. I'd taken a step, claimed my truth, but their response left me stranded, caught between their change and their limits. The dinner left a hollow ache, Gail's letter heavy in my pocket as I drove home. I didn't unfold it again, didn't need to. Her words, her regret were real, but they couldn't undo the years I'd stood alone. At work, Leslie noticed my quiet, her usual chatter replaced with a careful glance. She'd heard about the veteran group, my talks there, and offered to help with an outreach program for young vets. "You're good at this, Clara," she said, her voice firm. "Let me pitch in." I nodded, grateful, but my mind was still on that table. Harold's half-spoken praise, Nathan's push for me to shine. The outreach program took shape, a small setup at the community center with flyers and coffee urns. I mentored a handful of vets' kids barely out of uniform, their eyes wary but hopeful. One, a quiet guy named Eli, reminded me of myself, all guarded edges and buried pride. I listened as he talked about his discharge, his voice low, ashamed. "You did enough," I told him, meaning it. He looked at me surprised, like no one had said that before. I felt a shift, a purpose I hadn't known I needed. But family wasn't done pulling at me. A cousin, Sheila, called out of the blue, her voice syrupy with curiosity. "Heard you're some big Navy hero now," she said, a laugh in her tone. "People are saying you made it up, Clara. Embellished it." My grip tightened on the phone, heat rising in my chest. I was at the center, setting up chairs, Renee stacking cups nearby. "It's documented," I said, my voice even. "Check the archives." Sheila backtracked, mumbling about rumors, but the damage was done. I hung up my hands, shaking. Renee caught my eye, her brow raised. "Let them talk," she said. "You know your truth?" I nodded, but Sheila's words gnawed, a reminder that some would never see me. The next week, I spoke at the group again, my voice stronger, telling Eli's story, not mine to show what surviving looks like. I scanned the room, expecting Renee's nod, but my eyes caught Harold in the back. His coat folded over his arm, his face unreadable. He'd come unannounced and sat through my talk without a word. When I finished, he stood, gave a curt nod, and left. No hello, no pride. Just his presence, heavy and unexplained. I stood frozen, the room's applause fading, my mind on his silhouette against the door. Nathan sent me a package a few days later, a small box with a seal pin inside the kind they give to teammates. A note read, "You're one of us." I held the pin, its edges sharp, my throat tight. It was his way of reaching out, I knew, but it felt late, like a gesture meant to mend something already frayed. I set it on my counter next to Gail's letter, the historian's email still open on my laptop. Their efforts, their half-steps toward me, they mattered, but they didn't fill the space where their trust should have been. I took a walk to the cemetery that weekend, the grass damp under my shoes, the air thick with autumn. Grandpa's headstone was simple, his Navy service etched in stone. I knelt, tracing the dates, wishing he could see me now. I'd claimed my story started healing, but my family's shadows lingered, their change too slow, too incomplete. I stood, the wind cold against my face, and felt the weight of it all, not anger now, but a quiet grief for the years I'd fought alone. The outreach program grew, filling the community center with new faces each week. I found myself looking forward to Thursdays, to the hum of voices, the smell of cheap coffee. One of the vets, Tabitha, started coming regularly, a 23-year-old with a quiet voice and eyes that darted like she was waiting for judgment. She'd been a mechanic discharged after an injury and carried the same shame I'd known, like her service didn't count. I pulled her aside one night, handing her a soda. "You fixed machines under fire," I said. "That's not nothing." She blinked, her shoulders easing, and I saw a spark of belief take root. On a Saturday, I drove back to the naval base, no ceremony this time, just me and the open docks. The morning was crisp, gulls circling above, their cries sharp against the lapping waves. I walked the pier, my sneakers soft on the weathered boards, the water glinting like polished steel. I stopped at the edge, hands in my jacket pockets, and let the horizon hold me. I wasn't the officer I'd been barking orders, nor the woman who'd fled, hiding from her own name. I was something new, still forming, and that was enough for now. A family picnic came up, one I didn't dodge. The park was alive with kids running, the air thick with grilled hot dogs and laughter. Nathan sprawled on a blanket, tossing a football to a cousin's kid, his grin easy. Gail set out paper plates, her movements quick but calm. Harold sat in a lawn chair, sipping lemonade, his face softer than I'd seen in years. I joined them, setting down a bowl of fruit salad, and Nathan caught my eye. "Nice to see you, Clara," he said, simple but genuine. I nodded, a warmth spreading I hadn't expected. We ate, the conversation light, stories of Nathan's latest training, Gail's garden. I laughed when Nathan mimicked a drill instructor, his voice booming. Harold chuckled, a rare sound, and glanced at me, his eyes holding something new, not pride exactly, but a quiet acknowledgement. I didn't push it, didn't need to. I was there, part of the moment, not proving anything. Tabitha's face flashed in my mind, her tentative smile, and I realized I was carrying her strength too, not just my own. That night I started a blog, my laptop glowing in the dark of my living room. I wrote about the Navy. Not the missions or medals, but the small things, the weight of a well-packed crate, the trust in a team's nod. I wrote about leaving, about rebuilding, about finding purpose in a basement full of strangers. I hesitated, my cursor blinking, then hit publish. It was out there, my voice, not for Harold or Nathan, but for anyone who needed it, like Tabitha, like me. Gail called the next day, her voice bright. "I read your blog, Clara," she said. "It's beautiful." I sat on my couch, phone cradled, surprised by the lump in my throat. She'd commented online, a short note about resilience signed with her name. I thanked her, my words soft, and we hung up, the quiet in my apartment warm for once. I looked out my window, the city lights steady, and felt a stillness settle, like the tide had finally turned. I decided to surprise Nathan with something that felt right, a way to weave our paths together without words we weren't ready to say. I planned a small veteran event at the community center, a night of stories and shared silence. I asked Nathan to speak, to stand beside me, not as the SEAL, but as my brother. He agreed, his voice over the phone warm with surprise. I spent days organizing, pinning up flyers, arranging chairs, my hands steady with purpose. The event night was cool, the room lit, soft voices low as people settled in. Renee arrived early, lugging a tray of cookies, her laugh cutting through the nerves. Marcus showed up too, his nod quiet, but sure a friend now, not just Nathan's. Tabitha came, her posture straighter, her voice clearer, as she shared a story about fixing a chopper mid-mission. I watched her, my chest full, knowing she'd found her footing because I'd dared to find mine. Nathan took the mic after me, his story about a night swim and training, raw and honest, less about glory, more about fear and grit. The room leaned in, and I did too, seeing the kid I'd grown up with, not just the hero they cheered. When I spoke, I talked about mentoring, about Eli and Tabitha, about how listening heals. Our voices wove together, not competing, just there, side by side. I glanced at the back, half expecting an empty doorway, but Harold was there, leaning against the wall, his cap in his hands. He didn't clap, didn't smile, but he stayed, his eyes fixed on me, then Nathan. It wasn't everything, but it was something, a step I hadn't thought he'd take. Gail sat beside him, her hands folded, her face soft. I met her gaze and she nodded, a small gesture that felt like a bridge. The young sailor from the ceremony was in the crowd, her lieutenant bars new on her collar. Our eyes met, and I nodded, a silent wish for her to keep going. She returned it, her face calm, like she understood. Marcus raised a cup of coffee to me after his grin sly. "Your trouble, Winslow," he said. I laughed, the sound easy, unfamiliar. Renee hugged me, whispering, "You did this." Tabitha lingered, thanking me, her voice firm. I drove home, the night air sharp, my heart quiet. Later I sat on my balcony, a blanket over my knees, sketching a sloop under a sky full of stars. Its sails were full, cutting through a sea I didn't need to sail anymore. I set the pencil down, the page glowing in the moonlight, and let the stillness wrap around me. I wasn't chasing their approval, not Harold's, not Nathan's, not even my own. I was just here, whole enough, breathing slow, ready for whatever came next. At 29, I'm not the woman I was, the one who flinched at her own shadow, or stood silent under my family's weight. The days move slower now, steadier, like I've learned to walk without bracing for a fall. I wake early, not to alarms, but to the soft gray of dawn, brewing coffee in a chipped mug I've had since my Navy days. My apartment feels like mine, not a hiding place with books stacked on the table, their pages dog-eared from late-night reading. I've started gardening, small pots of basil and mint on my balcony, their green leaves a quiet kind of company. The veteran group is my anchor now, not the pendant I gave Nathan. I lead sessions, sometimes guiding new faces through their stories, their hesitations like echoes of my own. There's a guy, Javier, who joined last month, his hands always fidgeting, his voice low when he talks about his time in the Marines. I sit with him after listening, offering small truths I've pieced together. "You don't have to be whole to keep going," I tell him. He nods, his fingers stilling, and I feel the words settle in me too. My family's changed, not in grand gestures, but in the small ways that matter. We had dinner last week, just the four of us, the air lighter than it's been in years. Harold set the table, his movements deliberate, and when he passed me the bread, he held my gaze, a flicker of something soft in his eyes. It wasn't an apology, not outright, but it was close, a crack in the wall he'd built. Gail laughed more, her stories about her book club filling the room. Nathan teased me about my blog, his tone warm, not sharp. I didn't need their pride anymore, but sitting there sharing a meal, I felt part of something again. I've started running in the mornings along a trail near my place, the path winding through pines and open fields. My breath steadies with each step, the rhythm grounding me. I don't run to escape, not like I used to. I run to feel my own strength, the way my legs carry me, the way my heart keeps time. Sometimes I think of that young sailor from the ceremony, her lieutenant bars new and bright. I wonder where she is, what she's carrying. I hope she knows her worth the way I'm learning mine. The blog's grown strangers, leaving comments, their words raw and real. A woman wrote last week, saying my post about rebuilding gave her courage to face her own discharge. I read it on my balcony, the city waking below, and felt a quiet pride, not for the Navy officer I was, but for the woman I am. I don't sketch ships anymore, don't need to. My story's not in lines on a page, but in the life I'm building, one choice at a time. I keep a small notebook now, not for drawings, but for thoughts, fragments of days that feel true. I wrote last night about the way the light hits my basil plants, how their leaves curl toward the sun. It's not profound, not on its own, but it's mine a moment I noticed because I'm here present, not running. I set the pen down, the page open, and watch the morning unfold, my breath, slow, my heart full, ready to carry what comes next. A Sunday drive took me to a quiet overlook, the kind where the city sprawls below like a quilt, lights twinkling as dusk settles. I leaned against my car, the hood still warm, and watched the horizon soften into purple. I'd come here to think, to let the pieces of my life settle. Harold's small gestures, Nathan's steady presence, Gail's warmth, they were threads in a tapestry I no longer needed to force together. They were my family, flawed and human, and I could love them without needing their approval to feel whole. I've started volunteering at a local library, reading to kids on weekends. Their faces wide-eyed at tales of adventure remind me of the girl I was dreaming of, the sea. I bring books about explorers, not just sailors, but pioneers of all kinds, hoping they'll see there's no one way to be brave. One boy. Sam always asks for an extra chapter, his grin infectious. I stay late for him, my voice steady, finding joy in his curiosity. It's small, this work, but it grounds me, a reminder that impact doesn't need to be loud. Nathan and I have been planning a veteran charity run, something simple, a 5K, to raise funds for mental health support. We meet over coffee, sketching routes on napkins, our laughter easy now. He doesn't talk about my mission anymore, doesn't need to. We're just Clara and Nathan's siblings finding their way. Gail's joined in baking for the event, her hands dusted with flour as she tells me about her latest recipe. Harold's offered to set up the finish line, his gruff voice volunteering without fanfare. It's not perfect, but it's enough, a family learning to see each other. I found a photo in my desk last week, one I'd forgotten, me and Grandpa at a pier. My hair tangled from the wind, his sailor's cap tilted. I didn't frame it, didn't need to. I slipped it into my notebook, a quiet keepsake. I don't carry his pendant anymore, but I carry his belief in me woven into who I am. That's the difference now, I think. I don't need tokens or titles to know my worth. I've built it day by day in the choices I make, the people I lift, the life I live. The lesson came slow, carved from years of doubt and silence. My worth isn't tied to what others see, not Harold's pride, not Nathan's medals, not even the Navy's commendations. It's in the quiet moments, the basil growing, the kids listening, the vets finding their voice. I learned to carry my own anchor, not as a weight, but as a compass guiding me to a life that's mine. It's not about being enough for others. It's about being enough for myself, and that's the freedom I fought for. What's the anchor you carry, the thing that keeps you steady when the world doubts you? Share it below. Let's hold space for each other's truths. If this story moved you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to finding our way, one step at a time.